Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a very amazing and horrifying upload to share with you all. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the exciting and informative uploads I put out, click that bell icon. And finally, last but definitely not least, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Before we go any further, today's upload happens to be dedicated to my dad. My dad had surgery today, or yesterday, excuse me, and had a heart attack while they were putting stents in. This is the second heart attack that he's had. He had one last year during the same procedure, different leg. It's kind of touch and go right now with what's going on with him, but this happens to be my dad's favorite video that is on my channel, favorite interview. So I'm dedicating this to him. This happens to be a interview that changed my view on Dogman and certain theories about Dogman. I'm not going to say that I was closed-minded in any way when it came to any kind of religion or God involvement in these creatures, but this interview changed that view for me. So let's get into it. My guest tonight has been on another channel, and tonight is Brad's Redemption. Brad, how are you?
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate taking time out of your evening to share your experiences with us. And, I have talked to you for 2 times now, for about an hour and a half, 2 hours each time. I kind of feel like we're friends. I agree with a lot of what you say and a lot of your views and feelings. And through the grapevine, like everyone knows on the channel, I don't listen to other channels. And I've heard that you got a bad rap, and I kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to let everybody know what your views on your encounters and why, things went down the way they did. Like I said, Brad's Redemption, I don't feel like, the way you described everything, how it went down, I don't think that you did anything wrong. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, and you can kind of...
You want me to... Jeff, would you like me to go over what I feel about that first, or would you like me to share my most recent encounter with you first?
Why don't we go for the most recent encounter, and then, or, whichever you're comfortable with.
No, that's how I would do it. Yeah,
okay.
Let's do. I'll give you the encounter, and then you can, that might jog our memory as far as what are the things that we want to talk about regarding me. But you did a great job, by the way, of sharing my encounter. You read it almost word for word, short some of my expletives. But the my encounter, and I want to say first before I launch into this encounter that, you know, I did not intend on seeing a Dogman. I now live in a different state, Arizona to be exact, and I had a friend who is a Canadian who drove down here. I believe it was the middle of June. I think this happened on Friday the 17th, if my memory serves. And he came down a few days before that, and he stayed, you know, a few days after. I think he was here about a week. And he's a hunter. He's up in, I think he's in Saskatchewan, is the province that he lives in. And I guess there's a lot of hunting there. And he's a pretty avid hunter, mostly deer and elk and that type of stuff. And he does know, he's one of my closest friends, and he does know about my previous experiences, but he doesn't really believe me. He thinks that because I'm a part-time writer that I came up with these stories just to, you know, like test a script out on an audience. Right. And I assured him that wasn't the case. For
and you're not a hunter at all either. You're a collector of firearms.
No, I'm nothing. I'm not tactical. I'm not a camper. I'm not an outdoorsman. I am an adrenaline junkie. I've been in a lot of fights. I like to, you know, I've jumped out of planes. I bungee jumped. I used to surf really, really large waves when I was younger. Right. You know, I do none of this stuff has been recently, right? You know, in my early 50s now, so none of this is recently. But you know, I am somebody that likes adrenaline. I love that feeling of almost losing control. And, you know, I'm a gun guy, right? I'm not a gun nut, but, you know, my grandfather was a collector. My father was a collector. I'm a collector. I've been around guns my whole life. You know, I've spent probably hundreds of hours at the range. I used to be a member of a single action, which is like a cowboy gun, for those who don't know, single action shooting society member. So I got really good with that. I'm just a guy that spent a lot of time with I'm not really good with rifles, even, to be honest with you. Right. I have some rifles. I have, you know, enough that I could defend myself, but I'm really just a handgun guy. That's my specialty. I like handguns, and I'm good with them. I'm accurate with them. At 30 yards and in, I usually don't miss. Right. And so, but other than that, I like to hike. I mean, I can hike 10 or 12 miles if I need to, and I've done it many times. So I do like to hike. I do like to be out in the outdoors, but I'm setting the stage for this so that your listeners know I'm not like a camper or an outdoorsman. I'm not tactical. You know, I don't do tactical drills, or I haven't been to any tactical schools, none of that. So I don't consider myself any of those things. I just consider myself, you know, an aging old surfer from Southern California who, you know, is good with a handgun and likes to hike. That's right. Really, you know, and
you're not John Rambo.
No, I'm definitely not John Rambo or John Wick, either one. Yeah. But I am somebody, though, that when somebody says I can't do something or that I don't have the balls to do something, it puts a fire under me, and, you know, I'll see if I can do it just to say that I did it. Right. But getting back to my most recent, I just was setting the stage for some of your listeners who haven't heard me on another channel. So my buddy Kevin shows up, and he's there a few days, and he says, I'd like to do a little hunting. And so I said, okay, you know, whatever. So I found a spot north of Flagstaff. You gave the where it was when you read it, so I won't go over that. But it was north of Flagstaff, east of Flagstaff, in some mountains that are set aside. I guess if you can hunt there. And it wasn't deer season though, which was interesting because I told Kevin, he had mentioned like, well, I'd like to get a deer, but he, as a hunter, I'm sure he knew this, although, you know, he's from Canada. Maybe he didn't know our laws here, but it wasn't hunting season, and I told him that. and he's got a little bit of money. So he said, well, even if I get one, I'll just, and then there's a pretty big fine if you end up shooting one that's out of season. It's pretty substantial fine. But he said, well, if worse comes to worse, I'll just pay the fine. So I said, fine. So we ended up, we found a place to go. So this would have been Friday, June 17th. So coming up on a couple of months ago now. And we got in the car and we left, I don't know, 6 or 6:30 in the morning. It was about hour and a half, maybe hour and 40 minutes to get there. And as you read, when you went over the story, we pulled into a gas station when we were getting pretty close to our destination, and we got out of the car, and we were going to go in and get a coffee and have it for the rest of the trip. And when we were walking into the mini mart, coming out, he had just come through the doors, was this old Indian man, and kind of smallish, 5'9" or so, hair in a ponytail, totally gray. When I say old, I really mean old. He was, I would say, early 80s. And he was walking directly in my path, and so out of respect, I didn't want to bump into the guy. I stepped to my right, and he had eye contact with me the entire time. And when I stepped to the right, he quickly stepped over in the same direction and got right in front of me. And he took a few more steps towards me, and he put his hand on my heart, which, needless to say, it took me by surprise. First I thought he was going to hit me, but he was very gentle. He just put his hand on my heart, and he said, "Strong spirit, but your risk-taking, your recklessness," I'm sorry, guess what he said, "your recklessness and your risk-taking are going to get you killed." And then he removed his hand, he smiled at me, and he walked over to his car. He was under the canopy just like our car was. In fact, I think he was in the next car over. And as we watched him, Kevin looks at me and he goes, you know that guy? I shook my head and I said, "I've never seen that guy before in my life." And he thought that was strange. I thought it was strange, and the more I thought about it, the stranger that it got. It kind of got into my head as we were driving. We got our coffee and we put the gas in the car, and I was driving, and we went on to our spot, right? But as we were driving, that kind of started getting into my head. How could he have possibly known that? How would he know that I'm a risk taker? And how would he know that, I've been told earlier in my life that I have a, quote unquote warrior spirit, or a strong spirited person, independent, and which is what I took it. That's how I took it to what he meant. And I don't know that for sure, but that's how I took it. And, so as we were driving, Kevin mentioned that, he goes, "That's really odd that guy would say that." And I said, "Yeah, I said, I told you weird stuff has happened to me my whole life, man. So this isn't anything new." But I said, it is kind of odd that he knew that. And I don't typically believe in any of that Indian or Native American, if you will, mumbo jumbo stuff, the curses, and I don't believe in any of that stuff, really. And but I have to admit that I thought it was odd that he knew those things about me, even though we'd never seen each other before. So we got to our site, parked the car off on the side of the road, and Kevin said to me, "How you feeling today?" or something along those lines. And I said, "I'm good. Why?" And he's like, "Well, I feel like, really doing some hiking. So let's go way back up in there." I said, "Okay, whatever." And he's my age. We're both born in the same year. He's a little bit smaller than me. He's about 5'11", maybe 180 pounds. And for your guess, I'm a fairly decent sized guy. No giant, but I'm about 6'3", and maybe 230, 228, somewhere in there. And he was carrying a Tika rifle, which is a very, very nice rifle, a high-end bolt-action rifle, 7mm. And then he had I think it was a CZ 9mm that he was carrying as his sidearm. And I didn't have a rifle with me. For your listeners and those listeners who have heard me before, I didn't even have a rifle on me. I wasn't carrying a long arm of any I had a 357, a 686 plus, 7 rounds, 357 on my thigh. And as usual, I was carrying a 2.5 inch in my ankle holster that underneath my pants. That was our entire arsenal. We did not go there. I repeat, we did not go there to hunt a dogman, to kill a dogman, to even see a dogman. In fact, he and I, before that, as we were driving, we didn't even talk about Dogman. We talked about him. We talked about Dogman when he first got here.
Right.
We talked about it a little bit, but we didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah, you were under the impression, like you stated, that, and you said, hey, if you shoot a deer, it's going to be a lot of money. You were just under the impression that you were going on a hike, and that's what your agenda was for the day. You weren't going hunting. You were just hiking with your buddy.
No, I was wearing some loopholed binoculars, and he had said, and I'm not really a hunter. I've been hunting maybe twice in my life, but I'm not a hunter of any. In fact, the only thing I've ever killed is a dogman, right? And so when we were hunting, when we were out there, he had said, "Well, you just be my eyes for me, and help me." He has a scope on his rifle. He had a really nice scope on his rifle. I think it was a loophole as well. But anyway, he said, "You just be my eyes, and you look for me. Help me find things. And when you're scanning like a spotter." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." That's all we were going out there for. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I know I'm belaboring the point, but I want to make it perfectly clear. We did not have any intention of seeing, hearing, listening, none of it regarding a dogman. It was the farthest thing from our minds when we, and like I said, we didn't even talk about it once on the trip out there or the day of this. So I'd say maybe an hour and a half or two, maybe not, maybe an hour of walking. It's probably, I don't know, around 11 at this point. Maybe, maybe a little earlier, maybe 10, something along that late morning time. And we came up. We were walking through fairly thick. It was forest, but it wasn't like when you picture forest like where you're from, Jeff. Where it's real dense and there's trees every 2 yards.
Right.
That's not what this was. This was like a tree here, a tree there, but there was enough of them you would still say that it was like a forest, right?
Right.
I guess you call it an Arizona forest. People that are from Flagstaff who are going to be listening to this, they're going to know exactly where I'm talking about. But we were walking through, and really it was a really nice day. Things were really quiet, but not as quiet as they were about to get. But they were quiet and peaceful. All we could really hear was our walking as we were going through. It was peaceful. The air was crisp. It was hot. It's June, right? It was pretty hot, but it was pleasant, very pleasant actually. And we came, I'm going to say it was an hour and a half into our walk, because I was starting to get tired. And as we were coming through the forest, we came up to this like opening, and there was to our right, and I'm going to try to describe this as best I can like I did on the other show so people can really try to picture what happened. So as we come through the forest, or a light forest we'll call it, right, to our right and up maybe a little bit elevation-wise was this knockdown tree, whatever wood, I don't know what type of wood it was. I'm not even into that. I don't know what type of wood it was, but it was like a white color, like, because it had been petrified, it looked like, and it had been there for many, many years. It was probably 50 feet, if I had to guess, maybe, 40 to 50 feet, right? And it was laying on the ground facing this open, semicircled, almost looked like a stage, because there was a like a half circle where there were trees in the forest, and then there was this open area where it was just rocks and a few shrubs, but basically flat, almost like you would envision an amphitheater back in the
Roman day. I was just going to say that kind of.
Yeah, at Greek or Roman days, you would picture an amphitheater. It was kind of like that, and it was even elevated a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. and then it kind of went down into a little gully, and then it was elevated back where we ended up sitting down on the log. So as we saw this, right, there was trees on the right, trees on the left, and then trees back on the far end of this semicircle, and then there were no trees. It was open. So it was almost like we could see into this semicircle, if your listeners can picture that. So as we got over to the log, I said, "Oh, this is perfect height, man. We can sit on this. Why don't we stop and eat?" It was probably, I'm going to say, I might have been off on the times here. I think it was probably closer to 11 when we sat down there. And I had brought, peanut butter sandwiches and some water, some beef jerky, and I think I brought something else too. But anyway, we sat down and, we started eating, and we had finished, we were talking, and I noticed, like, right as I was finishing my sandwich or getting towards the end of it, right, I noticed that it got quiet. And any of your listeners that know, I've listened to your show before, they know what that quiet means.
Silence, yeah.
The silence, and it was deafening, right? It got really quiet, and I said to, actually Kevin said to me, he said, "Man, I got a bad feeling, dude." And I said, "Yeah, I know, me too." And my head was on a swivel, right? And that was the first time that Dogman even popped into my head. From the beginning of all of this, when all this morning started with him, this was the first time that it occurred to me, like this was the same thing happening all over again, where it got silent, right? Now, we still hadn't heard anything. It just got silent. There was no bugs, nothing. In fact, I could hear myself chewing. That's how silent it was. And, I'm looking around, and Kevin, he said again, he's like, "Dude, man, something's up. I just don't feel right." And he even stopped eating and put the sandwich back in the plastic bag, and I was carrying the backpack with the food in it, so he put it back into my backpack. And I finished my sandwich, and I'm starting to drink the water, and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, this doesn't feel right, man." And so we were kind of worried, and he's like, "Well, do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything." And he's like, "Are there bears here?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I mean, maybe black bear, but I know there's not grizzly." Right. Even in northern Arizona, I'm pretty sure there's no grizzly bear or something that big, right? And I don't think there's wolves either. So I said, it could be a mountain lion or something like that. But I said, you got a 7mm. It's not going to be a problem if it's a mountain lion. So we sat there, and then I don't know. I'm trying to remember exactly how long after that we had decided we were going to get up and keep walking a little further into it, because there was where the semicircle was, there was like a I don't want to say an opening, but that's for lack of a better word or term. There was kind of an opening on the far side, because we were in front of the semicircle. And if we kept going straight, we would go back into the forest, right, and keep walking. And there was a hill in the distance, and he wanted to kind of get to the base of that hill. So I said, "Okay, well, we're not that far from that, so let's just keep going." When I sent you that email, it was still fresh in my mind, or more fresh in my mind. So whatever it says in there is probably more accurate. I'm trying to do this based on on my memory, but it seems like I said to Kevin, because I'm hard of hearing, and I said to him, I said, "Did you hear that?" And he goes, "No." So I'm listening, and then it sounded like, to me, like somebody walking right through the brush, a ways away from us still. It was kind of distant.
Okay.
And so Kevin goes, "Oh, yeah, now I hear it." So, I put my binoculars up. I'm looking around. I don't see anything. And he looked through his scope. He didn't see anything. And I said, "Well, I don't, that could be anything, right?" And so, but sure enough, maybe 15 seconds after I said that, we see this like really large, I don't want to call it black. To me, it looked more like a chocolate colored brown wolf, right? It was on all fours. Comes through the thing, right? And immediately when I saw that, I don't remember if we had sat down behind the log. I just don't remember what the events were, if we sat down behind the log. But I remember when we saw that, I told Kevin, I said, and he was already looking through it, and he goes, "That's a big wolf, man." So I walked around the log, and I was on the far side of the log, right? And I kind of bent down, and I was looking through my binoculars, and he was kind of like the wolf was kind of like sniffing on the ground. He was acting like a dog, his tail was wagging a little bit. Then he went over towards a tree, and he was sniffing at the base of a tree at the far end of the semicircle. And it really did, just at that point, it was looking like a wolf. But I said, "That's a really big wolf," right? So of course that fear came over me, right? I'm like, you know what, that's too big. That's not a 150-pound timber wolf. That's way bigger than that.
Right.
And Kevin concurred. He was like, "Yeah, that is big, dude." And I said, at this point, this animal hadn't seen us yet, right? So I got down behind the log. Was probably, I don't know, 18 to 20 inches off the ground, right? So I got down. I wasn't all the way down, but I was still, I was crouched down, and Kevin, as he was, staring at this, I could see his face, right? And when I looked over at him, I could see that he'd never seen this before, right? Something this large before, right? And he kind of got this, like, I don't want to say he went white, but that's what it appeared to me, is that he was kind of going white on me. And as he was looking at it, he turned his head and he looked at me, and he's like, "Dude, I don't think that's a wolf." And when he said that, I looked through my binoculars, right? And as I'm looking at this thing, sure enough, this thing like stands up, right? And when it stood up, I can't tell you. I think I said it in the letter or the email that I sent you. I can't tell you the fear that I had, and of course, the first thing that popped into my mind was, "Not again. There's no way." And that's what I told you earlier when we were talking. It's hard to believe that this could happen to somebody this many times. Yeah. I understand it's hard to believe. I get it, because I would have a hard time believing it. But here it is. Here's this animal standing on its hind legs, and now it's like sniffing into the air. And when I saw it sniffing into the air, I knew it had caught scent of us, right? And I realized at that moment that I was still within its sight. If it would have turned and looked at me, it would have seen me. So I kind of panicked, and I don't know if it was the motion of me moving so quickly to get down on my belly, or if it was the sound that I made when I hit the ground. But as I went down, Kevin was looking through the scope, right? He was just over the log, and he said that it turned and looked our way. It didn't look right at us, but it looked our way when I got down, right? So I ended up crawled a little bit to the very end of the log, because we were already pretty close to the end of it. I crawled to the end of it and kind of like lurched to my body sideways so I could see around it. So I was lower, but I could still see it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
so you were kind of like, you were almost laying right next to the log, kind of using that
on the ground,
yeah,
on my elbows. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I wasn't any taller than the log, so I didn't stand out, but I could still see him. Now there was brush, and there was, shrubs and stuff that were in between where our position was and where this, turned out to be a Dogman was, right? And so I would say that we were, I think I told you this in the email, but I think as best I could tell, we were about 80 yards. And so, I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of events here so that I get this right. So then, as we were watching it, he kind of stood up and he sniffed, and he kept doing that, right? And at one point, he turned directly towards us and sniffed. And I told Kevin, I said, "He can smell us." And Kevin said, he goes, "Is that an effing Dogman?" I said, "I'm not 100% sure, but I said, I'm pretty sure that it is, because I've never seen another animal stand up like that, and he seems to be walking on his hind legs, so I'm going to say that that's probably a Dogman." and we're talking in really low, in case your audience is wondering, we were talking in whispers.
Right.
Kevin and I were only about 4 feet apart. So 5
now,
feet.
really quick, he is the one couple of times that you guys spoke about this. He, like you said, skeptical about it.
No, he thought I was making this up.
Right.
He thought, even when I told him that I had killed one of these animals, he thought that I was, again, because I do a little writing on the side. I'm not a professional writer by any stretch, but I do a little writing on the side. He thought that I was testing a script. That's what he said. That
Right.
I was testing a script for an audience to see how they received it, and if it would maybe be picked up like as a movie or something. And I told him, I said, Kevin, I swear to you, brother, that's not what I'm telling you. What happened, how it happened, and all 3 of the encounters he knew about.
Right. Now, what was
he
his
just-
face like when he said, "Is that an effing Dogman?" And you said, "I'm pretty sure that is."
Well, Kevin's got these blue eyes. I have green eyes, right? He's got these blue eyes that are very, like, what I call telling. And when you look into his eyes, you can almost see what he's thinking, right? And I saw nothing but unadulterated fear in his eyes, because even at 80 yards, you could tell by the reference points of how tall the Dogman was to the trees that he was around 8 feet.
Okay.
And I would say weight-wise, he's not the biggest one. The biggest one, was on another encounter I ever saw, was close to 9 feet and probably 600 pounds. This one, if I had to guess, I would say, I'm not saying I have an expert opinion, but my opinion would be he was probably close to 8 feet and about 500 pounds.
Okay.
And when he walked, you could hear the thumping when he walked. So he must have had some weight. If he was only 150 pounds, you wouldn't have heard him as he was walking through the forest like we did from that distance, right?
Yep.
So now I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of events at this point. So when, Kevin and I were talking, I looked at Kevin and I said, shh, because I had seen him look our way a couple of times. Now, I don't think he saw us, because he didn't act like he did at all, but he did look our way a couple of times. So I'm sure he either heard, and they have great hearing, right?
Yeah.
That he either heard the rustling or maybe the whispers or something, but he just couldn't place where it was. I have to say to anybody listening, I never even drew my gun. This entire encounter, what I'm about to tell you, I never even drew my gun. I never even pulled my gun at all.
Right.
Kevin was only using his to look through. So at some point, again, if people, go back and listen to what your show from 10 days ago or a couple weeks ago, if they want the exact, and I'm trying to do this on memory, and if I'm off on the sequence of events, what I'm saying is absolutely true and how it happened, but what I want to get right is the sequence of events, and that's what I'm not 100% sure that I'm giving the right sequence of, say, like this happening before that happened, but the sum and substance is there. So at some point when we're watching him, right, I hear again, like coming from the opposite side of the semicircle, I hear more footsteps, also heavy. And so now the Dogman, who's he's looking around, sniffing, right? He's just doing what Dogmen do, right? He didn't appear, in my opinion, I don't think he knew that we were there 100% yet. He was about to know, but he did at that moment. I don't think he knew.
Okay.
And so here comes this, I'm just going to say, a man, right? Here comes this really large, after we heard the crunching of leaves, we noticed, and I'm watching this entire thing through my binoculars, and these are really good binoculars, so I can see everything perfectly clearly at 80 yards. Perfect. And I hear this crunching, and I notice that at one point the Dogman then turns immediately. He takes about 3 steps back, and he's facing whatever this is that's coming through the other side. There's probably, I would say, 15 yards between the Dogman, and here comes this large, for for lack of a better descriptive term so your audience understands, Nordic man with, like I said, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I really like women, so I don't want people to take this the wrong way. But he was the most beautiful man I've ever seen.
Right.
And he comes through the forest, and he's wearing this. I mean, the clothes didn't look that outlandish, but they just didn't. He had a black mock neck on, or maybe it was dark gray, and he had a light gray, what I would call like a windbreaker looking thing, and then these pants on that were a similar color to the jacket. Or no, actually they were a little bit darker. They were more like the mock neck, and then he had these kung fu looking shoes. They weren't kung fu shoes, but that's what they looked like to me, because they didn't really have a heel on them. And he had this wrapping, like the World War I soldiers had those things that they'd put on over their boots, so their boots wouldn't get caught in stuff, and then it would come up above the bottom of their pants.
Yeah, so things couldn't get in their pant too. Yeah.
Right. It was similar to that, but it was just cloth that he had wrapped, tightly around.
Okay.
And he was wearing these dark colored kung fu shoes, right? He had socks on. The only thing you could really see of him, everything was covered except his hands and his face. And he looked sunburned, but he had this, what I would call a long flat top type hairdo. I told you this in the interview, or in that when we first talked. He looked like he was much better looking than Dolph Lundgren, but that's who he reminded you of from Rocky IV.
Right.
Just that same type of haircut, platinum blonde hair like that, these piercing blue eyes that I could see through the binoculars. That's how blue his eyes were. I could see them looking through the binoculars at 80 yards away. Okay. So that should tell you how blue his eyes were.
Right.
And here he comes out, right, and he's wearing, now it wasn't a katana, but for lack of a more descriptive term, that's what it appeared like, and people don't know that's a samurai sword, right? It looked like a samurai sword, maybe a 2.5-inch blade, and then he had look to me, I don't know this for sure, I'm just speculating here, but it looked like a matching dagger that was maybe 12 inches long.
Okay.
On his hip, on his, I guess you call it his hip, on the opposite, which would have been his right side.
Right.
And he
not to correct you, but 2.5 foot, you meant, right? Not 2.5 inch.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to get that so people could, there was no mistake.
Yeah, not 2.5 inches. That would have been a problem, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, and he had this scabbard on the back of he had some sort of a strap that was holding the scabbard on the back, right? And you could see the sword handle sticking up above his head. Now, for your audience, when I say that this man was large, I'm not just saying it because I'm at 6'3", and we'll call it 230. I'm not a giant, but I'm a pretty decent sized guy. And this guy was, well, later on, as I get into the story, I know for sure he was about 6'8", but I even guessed him at that when he first came out. I said, this guy's got to be 6'7", 6'8", 265 pounds, a large man.
Right.
Not just a 6'3" guy and the 225 pounds. No, this was a large man, and you could see that he was muscular through his clothing, and his clothing wasn't tight, it was baggy.
Okay.
Well, at least the jacket was kind of baggy, but the mock neck looked like it was tight, but he had a jacket over it, and you could still see how big this dude was. So he comes through this opening, and as he comes through, the Dogman kind of looks surprised and takes another few steps backwards. And as he does that, this man reaches behind and he pulls out the katana, and he does that thing, and I know you mentioned it, I don't know what it's called, but people who know swords will know what I'm talking about, that thing where you twirl it in your hand, right?
Yeah. And
he does it with one hand, right? And he just, he moves the sword, right? And at that moment, I think that was the moment where Kevin said, "Are we on a movie set?" And I looked at him and I go, "It kind of seems that way, right? We're whispering, right? It kind of seems that way." And then Kevin, when I think it was a little before that, now that I'm thinking about it, but again, go back and read the story if you guys want the actual.
Yeah, I'll put the link. I'll put the link to the story in the description. So
because I'm trying to get the sequence of events, but I think I'm off on that. But Kevin at some point had said, "Are we on a movie set?" And I'm like, "It sure looks like it, right?" But there were no cameras, there was no other people. We were totally alone, so I don't think we were on any type of a movie set, right? I mean, I just don't. But Kevin had said when this guy came out, Kevin lost his composure a little bit, and he gave away our position. And he kind of was babbling, and he's like, "Dude, should I shoot it? That guy's gonna get killed, man. That guy's gonna get killed."
Yeah.
And when he said that, both the Dogman and this individual looked. It's almost like we interrupted their about to be battle, and they both turned and looked at us. And I knew at that point that they knew we were there, because Kevin, he had lost control a little bit. He said it way too loud, and I knew they heard us because they looked as soon as he said it. And he said it a couple of times, and he's like, "Dude, should I shoot it? Should I shoot it?" And I said, "No, man, just be quiet. Be quiet." And he kept going, and I looked at him, and I don't normally talk to my friend that way, but I could tell he was scared, right? And so I said, "Shut the F up." And so,
yeah, he's losing it at that point.
He kind of gathered himself a little bit, right? And I think he said, "Copy that," something along those lines. And so as soon as I got him to quiet and I looked back, they were still staring at us, right? So I knew that they might not have been able to see our actual position, but they knew somebody was there at that point.
Right.
So the Dogman took 2 steps forward, and when he did, this man tilted his sword back and put the tip right against his forehead and closed his eyes. Huh. And I remember thinking, what? I remember my exact thought was, who in the hell is this guy? Because he seemed so calm, so like he had done this before. Right. And maybe he has, but I'm just, you don't know that when you're, you got to try to put yourself.
At this point, you don't know anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know anything. You got to try to put yourself in my shoes. Your audience should put themselves in my shoes. I'm viewing this with all my baggage that I bring, and here I am now seeing this again. I'm not involved myself, but I'm watching this much stranger event than any of my encounters. I'm watching this strange event unfold, and here's this tall Nordic-looking, Anglo-looking dude closing his eyes when he's got a Dogman 30 feet in front of him and putting the tip of his spear against his forehead, and it looked to me like he was praying. That's what it looked like. And then he opened his eyes again, he did that twirl in his hand, and he pointed the sword right at the Dogman. Right? And they kind of stood, and they weren't moving. Both of them were just kind of locked in a stare. I don't know if they were thinking about what they were going to do, but then all of a sudden, it kind of took me by surprise how quick. I know how fast they are, but when you see them move, it's always, a little overwhelming to see just how quick they move, right? And he closed the distance so quickly. But what was more startling was how this guy brought the katana up to his right and slashed down, if your audience can understand what I'm saying, slashed down from top right to bottom left. And as he did it, he kind of did I don't even want to, I don't know how to explain it, but he was able to do that and move. He twisted his body and he moved. And while he was moving, he ducked because the Dogman swiped with his left hand and he had his claws out. He swiped with his left hand, and the guy was able to avoid it, but he had put a deep gash in the chest, so deep that the Dogman put his hand up on his chest, and he turned around, and when he turned around, you could see the ray. He was bleeding from his chest big time. The Dogman and this guy were standing in the opposite places they had been when they started this fight, right? The man was on the other side and the Dogman was on the other side, and they had squared off again. And so there was a little break in the action where they were just staring at each other. And I swear to you, I can't say for sure, but it looked to me like the dude smiled at him.
Yeah.
Like he looked at this creature and smiled at it, right? And
like a mocking kind of smile, like
a mocking smile, like you don't know what's just about to happen.
Right.
That's what I took it, right? And so the Dogman was just like, he took his hand off his chest and he was like, I don't know how to explain it, but he was kind of doing like this thing with his hands. He was like he was shredding something, wanting to get at him, and he was growling and really loud and snarling. I mean, just frightening stuff, right? And so I looked back at the man, and he's just standing there, right? And sure enough, they're probably only 15 feet apart. And so the Dogman maybe takes 3 steps, and he had closed half the distance in those 3 steps, right? And to my surprise, this man took 3 steps forward as well and drove the katana with both hands into the stomach and out up he drove it through the stomach, but it kind of went up and came out the back of the Dogman. And then as he did it, he kind of did a tuck and roll to his left, like towards us, but to his left. And the Dogman, and then he kind of turned around. The Dogman kind of spun around a little bit. And after he did this, the blonde guy actually turned his back and was looking out at us. And the Dogman was kind of going left and right and left and right. He was kind of like wavering. You could tell he was done just by looking at him, right? And the man was out, like, it was almost, I felt like he was looking at us, and he wasn't looking directly at us, but he was out looking like he was saying, to me it seemed like he was saying, did you guys see that? that was the feeling that I got, right? And so he had his back, this is how confident he was. He actually had turned his back on this Dogman. Apparently he knew he had him, because the Dogman kind of wavered and went right. He turned around a little bit, and he was kind of choking, and blood was coming out, and he's making all these noises. You could tell he was done, right? And so he fell only maybe 6 feet from the feet of this guy. So the guy takes his little, not little, but it's a big dagger, 12-inch dagger out, and he walks up and he grabs the head, and he like lifts up the head. The Dogman was still alive at this point. He was a goner, but he was still alive. And he like grabs his head and he lifts it a little bit, and he plunges this thing into the neck of the Dogman.
Wow. And
I heard Kevin go, "What the F? Who?" And I'm starting to like go. And I said to Kevin, and this is the time I said to him, I said, "Dude, we got to be on a movie set or something. I mean, what?" And he's like, "Dude, there's got to be camera." He said that. He's like, "There's got to be cameras around here or something. This is some sort of we're watching some sort of special effects or something." And I said,
"Cryptid Kill Bill or something."
Yeah, it was we were just speechless. And so when after he drove it in, he kind of stood up, right? And he looked at it for a second, and you could see the Dogman slowly stop. He was moving, and then he stopped moving, right? And the man was just looking down at him, right? And then he turned and he walked out towards the end of, or like, the beginning of this semicircle, right? And he spoke directly to us. And he said, "You guys can come out now." Just like that. Regular American English. No English speaking, from England type, just a regular. It almost sounded like he was from California, to be honest with you. Just the way he said, "You guys can come out now," just in that calm of a voice, right? So then he goes back, and we're still watching, and he goes back, and he pulls out the knife. He pulls out this little cloth from inside of his jacket, and he wipes down his dagger and puts his dagger back in its sheath. And then he pulls out he had to like move the Dogman's body a little bit, and he pulls out his knife, and with the same cloth, he wipes the blade down, right? And I noticed that when he did that, there was no blood of any kind. It looked the same way it looked when he brought it out from his jacket. He wiped off the blood, put the thing back inside pocket of his jacket, is what it looked like to me. And then he did this thing where he placed his sword back in the sheath that was on the opposite side. If you know, like when people wear a scabbard on their back like that, it's usually to one side of the head or the other. Well, with his right hand, he took it without finding it with his left hand and found the opening of the sheath. That's a 1 in a million type thing, right?
Yeah, just
and he was able to. Yeah, it was almost impossible, and he got it in on the first try, like he had done it so many times before. And so Kevin and I, at this point, and I might be out of sequence here on exactly. But you get the gist of it. And so we're looking at each other, and Kevin goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't really know what to think, Kevin." Just like that. I said it just in that tone. I said, "I don't really know what to think." And I said, he's like, "Well, you think this guy's dangerous?" I said, "He very well could be dangerous." And then he said again, this man said again, he's like, "I'm not going to hurt you guys." And so I looked at Kevin and I whispered and I said, "Okay, don't point the gun at him, but keep the gun and keep your rifle in your hand. Just don't point it at him." And Kevin looked at me and he says, "Okay." So we stood up and we made eye contact with him finally. And we're about now, I'd say, because he'd walked to the outer end of this circle. So we were maybe 60 yards from each other. So we started walking, and he went back at this point over by the Dogman. And so we were walking up. And as we got up to him, I think I said first, however it's written in the story is how it went down. But I think I said first, "Where did you come from?" And he said something like, I was out hunting, right? I think that's what he said, something along those lines. And, he had said, I think we said something along the lines of, or I said, well, he asked what we were doing, right? And we said, well, we were out hiking, we were, hunting. And I think I said, but I wasn't hunting this. And he said, "Not this time." And he smiled at me, and he called me by my first name, Brad. And he knew Kevin's name too.
Yeah.
And Kevin said, again, and I know I'm belaboring this, but I want your people to know how it's written, how you wrote it is actually how it happened. I'm trying to remember what he said, when he said it, and the sequence, but I'm just going to say what I think I remember. Kevin said, "How do you know our names?" And this guy said, "Oh, I think you know the answer to that." And he kind of smiled at us. And he had said when we walked up, he said, "Don't shoot." He put his hands up jokingly, right? He said, "Don't shoot me, Kevin."
Yeah.
And Kevin looked like he was about to shit his pants, to be honest with you. And so I said, where did you come from? And he goes, "Oh, I was out." And he goes, "I was just hunting." I said something like, "You were hunting with that?" I said, "You don't even have a," he's like, "Well," and he pointed to my 357 and he goes, "That's cheating." He goes, "If you really want to hunt one," something along the lines, "if you really want to hunt one, the best way to do it is a sword." I started laughing, and I said, he pointed at my gun and he goes, "Those are cheating." And he goes, "And you well know, Brad, how hard it is to kill one with those."
Yeah.
And when he said that, it felt like he was reaching into my soul, and he was, you can tell when I'm talking about it. It's like it's almost too much for me to even believe that I lived it. And so we said a couple other things, and then I said, "What's your name?" No, that was after. I think that's when he was walking away. Yeah, that's when he was walking away. I think I said something like, "So, what do you," and he goes, that's right. I said, "What do you guys call these things?" And he goes, "Well, I believe you guys call them Dogmen."
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, "You guys? Well, aren't you a member of you guys, right?" But I didn't say that at the time, but that's what I was thinking. And I said, "Well, what do you guys?" And I kind of joked when I said that. I was, kind of had a smile on my face. I said, "Well, what do you guys call them?" And he goes, "Well, they have many names, but the one we use most is Hellhound." I said, "Hellhound, that makes sense." And he's like, that makes sense. And he said, you guys got to be careful out here. And I said, really? And then I don't think you wrote this I don't think I wrote this in the email, but I forgot. But he had said, he was out here for you, Brad. And when I said, who was out here for me? And he pointed down at the Dogman. And I thought that's what sent chills through and I said, really? We didn't. And then I reiterated, I said, we didn't come out here to hunt this. We came out here just to hike, and Kevin wanted to get a deer or something.
Right.
And he's like, well, he was here. He was here because you were here. And I just kind of shook my head, and I was, I didn't know what to say. And he goes, you guys really got to keep your head on a swivel when you're out here. And I said, yeah, no shit. And he kind of chuckled. And he said, well, I guess I better be getting back. And then he picked up the ankles of both legs and and like you would carry if you were going to drag something behind you, right? Some sort of a big animal, you would grab them by the heels, right? Yeah. And in this case, it wasn't a heel. You know what the Dogman feet look like, right? He grabbed them by like that thing on the back of their foot.
Kind of like that ball thing at the back.
Yeah, that ball thing. Exactly. That's how I would describe it too. And he started walking towards the opposite end of the semicircle, like he was going to go back into this. There was an opening on the other side of the woods. Not an opening, but there was enough room between the trees that he could walk, dragging this creature, right? And I said, so that's it? And he goes, I'll see you again, Brad. And then he got maybe 10 feet away from me. And maybe not even that, maybe 7-8 feet away from me. And the Dogman was literally at my feet. And he said, I go, so that's it? What's your name? And he turned with he still was holding on to the animal, but he turned and he looked, and it was the first time that we made direct eye contact close like that. And he looked at me into my green eyes with his blue eyes, right? And he said to me with this quirky kind of smart-ass smile, you can call me Daniel. Huh. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, and he kind of turned around and he was laughing. And I said, well, I'll see you, Daniel. That was the last thing I said to him. And as he was walking away, he yelled out over his shoulder, don't shoot me, Kevin. And then he kept walking, and we could hear him laughing as he was walking. I mean, he had a sense of humor, right? He's like, don't shoot me, Kevin. Right. And he kept walking, and about maybe 15 seconds after that, we couldn't see him anymore, and all of a sudden we couldn't hear him anymore. He was gone.
That's where the email that you sent me ended. And you and I, like I said, have talked, a couple times extensively about, multiple things, but this encounter as well. And without getting into too much detail, but a lot of the subscribers that heard this had that same feeling that you did, that Daniel was an angel.
I don't believe in, I know that you may, or some of your listeners may believe in the ancient alien thing. I don't believe in the ancient alien. I believe that, without getting biblical, but Yahweh our God is God, and he has angels, and they look like this based on this research that I've done. Not every single one of them's blonde, but they always appear as Caucasian men with green or blue eyes in my research. And I have to say, as soon as I saw him, as soon as he came into my view, and you know how that old saying is, whatever your gut tells you when something first happens is usually right.
Right.
And my gut feeling was that this was an angel, because, okay, Jeff, he was too big. I'm not saying there aren't men that size. There's plenty of men in the NBA. Yeah. There's plenty of men in the NFL that are that size, but they're not perfect like him.
Right. He was perfectly proportioned. The face, like he had
his teeth were like so white that they gleamed in the sun. Right. He had the perfect lips, the perfect straight, Anglo nose. His ears were small. He had a small forehead with a full head of this platinum blonde. One blemish on his hand, because all I could see was his hands and his face. but they had no blemishes, no freckles. He didn't even have any face hair. Now that I think about it, he had no face. Didn't even look like he had a beard shadow.
Okay.
It looked like there was no shadow, but he was sunburned, so I could tell that he'd been out in the sun before. So, is it possible, to any of your listeners, is it possible that this was just some dude? That was just some badass dude? Yes, it's possible. It's also possible that we stumbled upon some hoax or movie set thing, and we just didn't realize that we were involved in it, and they brought us into it, I guess you'd say, and we,
Yeah, but you think you'd hear it,
Yeah,
Especially
we would have
after...
heard people. We would have heard people, and we saw no cameras, and we looked too.
Yeah.
After I even spent time after Daniel had left. I spent time looking around, is this being captured on film?
Right.
I was looking around. It wasn't. This was a real incident. I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty. You can't say anything for 100% certainty,
No.
but I can tell you that this individual was perfect in every way. Like I said earlier, I've never seen a more beautiful man than this.
Right.
Any woman that saw this man would have said, "My God, he's perfect."
Right.
And not only that, he was huge. This dude was a badass. And by the way, he was more than 260. When I got up close to him, he was at least 40 pounds heavier than me. And so he's probably 270, 275 maybe. Right. At 6'8". This is a big dude.
Just perfection. Like you honestly think, for me, when I read it and then heard it again and thought about it, the way you described him, the way you described how he just, you only heard him slightly. You heard that Dogman coming in for a period of time. This was not, he was there. And then he grabs the Dogman and leaves, but you don't hear him after that. He refers
we heard him for about 10 seconds.
Right. But then nothing. And then refers to the Dogman as a hellhound. Really, just to me, says this was an angel.
And what did he mean? What was the most telling moment for me, I think, is when he said, "You guys call him Dogman." Well,
and knowing your names, knowing our names.
The anticipation. But what did he mean
Kevin
by that,
was thinking
though,
about
Jeff?
shooting him at one point. You know what I mean? Or whatever, with a sense of humor. I mean, it just.
I don't know, man. I like I said, he didn't include himself in you guys.
Yeah.
And then he said, "We call them." To me, if he's part of the human race and the human experience, why wouldn't he have said, "We"? Why didn't he say first, "Well, we call them this"? And he could have included himself, in that with me. Right. But he didn't. He said, "You guys call them Dogmen."
Yeah, completely separating himself from...
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Right. I mean, he could have been around here, you guys call them, but, where I'm from, we call them. But he didn't. He just said, you call them. We call them. He was just very...
There was a delineation between us. And this guy was, he showed, he didn't even, for your listeners, so that they can really picture this and try to understand how this has changed my life completely. This dude didn't even sweat. There was his cheeks weren't red. How most Caucasians, when they're exerting themselves, they get that red, like I get. You get that redness in your cheeks. He wasn't even sweating or out of breath.
Right.
I don't know how else to explain it other than to say he was perfect in every way.
Right.
And he had a sense of humor, which you wouldn't, normally when you're talking about biblical things, it's such a serious thing. But this guy had a sense of humor.
Yeah, you don't think, but, he knew your name specifically, knew that, and you and I had talked about this, and it's almost like he was your guardian angel. And,
I don't want to say that because I don't want to speak for the Father, but it does seem to me, I'm a person that, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, said that when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, is it possible that there's another explanation for this?
Absolutely.
That it was an alien of some sort? I guess you could say, but you know, he sure looked human. I mean, even though he was a perfect human, he sure looked human. He didn't look alien in any respect. Right. My feeling is, I won't even use the term guardian angel because, you know, but he knew about my past, and we'll get into that.
That's the only reason why I said guardian. Like, he was like, he knew you. He knew you. He also knew Kevin, you know, but he knew you, so...
Well, he knew I had killed a Dogman, too.
And maybe that's, I mean, like you said, you don't want to, you can't really make the judgment, but, you know, in my eyes, to me, if he was, you know, the angel that was sent to protect you at that very moment, he obviously knew you. He's, you know, known of your past, so maybe that's where the sense of humor came in, or, you know, who knows, but it's an absolutely...
When you hear this story, it's hard not to think, and again, I'm not trying to make myself as some, you know, that I'm so important that I have to have an angel that's guarding over me. He may very well guard over other people as well, but it just, if I had to guess, if you were to hold my feet to the fire as to what transpired, I would say, in my opinion, that this was an angel. And whether he was my specific guardian angel, I don't know. Right. But he did say that the Dogman was there because of me. He didn't say Kevin. He said me.
Right.
So that tells me that he was there, even though he didn't say this. It's kind of implied that he was there to protect me.
Yes.
Because I wasn't equipped. Neither one. I mean, Kevin did have a 7mm bolt-action rifle, and if push would have come to shove, we probably could have fended. If he was alone now, right? If he was alone, we probably could have fended him off. But had there been a pack of them, we were dead.
Yeah. I got about a half an hour of record time left, so I do want to kind of get into why we called it the redemption, not to cut this short, but
no.
We keep referring to your past encounters, and I have not heard them. They're on another channel. We're not going to mention the channel, but they are. Many people probably have heard them. You, in my eyes, really got a bad rap from what I heard from people who have heard your encounters, and knowing you now for, you know, the time that we've spoken, I kind of got a really good feeling of who you are, and you're not a malicious person. You're not a, you know, you don't strike me that way. So why don't we now, because like I said, I got about a half an hour. Why don't we kind of now touch basis on that? And okay. Just so everyone knows, this will be the last time Brad kind of shares any of this with anybody, you know?
Yeah, I have no desire to go on any more shows. I only am doing this show because of what I'm about to tell you, how I feel like the other show that I was on, again, without mentioning names, because the person who runs that show was good to me, so I can't say anything bad about him.
Right.
But the people who made the comments in all of my encounters were, I would say, 80% against me and 20% for me. So it was overwhelmingly negative. You know, I'll just give a brief synopsis. I've had 3 encounters prior to this in 3 different states now. This is why, if I was listening to this, I understand people would say, I can't believe this guy. This is just too much. I get it. Because I am a very logical, reasonable person myself, and I'd be like, what are the odds that one person has 4 encounters now, right? But I'd be lying then, because they did happen. So I have to tell the truth, and I wanted to come on a forum where hopefully I'm not treated like this bloodthirsty guy, you know, who is just trying to kill Dogman every time he goes out into the forest. And, I admit that, well, let me start with my first encounter. I had my first encounter in Southern California, up in the hills. I lived in Southern California, let's just say close to the San Gorgonio Mountains. For people that are from Southern California, they'll know where that's at. And there's a park, a national park up there. And I used to go walking at night, and I had my first encounter not long. I mean, literally, 3 or 4 months after I even knew. I'd always heard of what Sasquatch and stuff like that, but I'd never heard of Dogmen before I started watching these particular shows. Right. And it was only 3 or 4 months after that I had this encounter. And it wasn't violent. It could have been, but it wasn't. In fact, I don't even think it was really necessarily evil. No. He could have, the Dogman that I encountered that time, he could have I was armed, because I never go into the forest unarmed. And I would advise everybody listening to never, despite what you may hear from other people, right? Yeah. I would never tell anybody to go in the forest unarmed.
Well, period. Really quick too, is my subscribers know I go out in the woods where Tom Messick disappeared, and the majority of them say, I hope you're armed. So this is why I feel that you're on a platform that you can explain how you feel.
Yeah, I do feel that, it's lunacy to tell people to go into a forest at night unarmed.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say that any other the person who runs the show tells people to do that, but perhaps guests have come on and have told people that, it's unnecessary to be armed, that, these animals know that you're armed, and if you're not armed, they'll leave you alone. And I mean,
they're an apex predator. They're a hunter,
They're opportunists.
Yes.
And if you're unarmed, you're an opportunity for them. They have killed many, many times. Every show that I've listened to, there's always a possibility when you encounter an animal like this, that's 500 pounds and 8 feet tall, there's a good chance, if it's hungry, that it's going to try to eat you or at least hurt you.
Yeah.
And, the idea to somehow, pray to it or ask permission to enter the forest, right. I don't want to make fun of other people, but if you're that dumb that you're going to go into the forest at night and get on your knees and pray to one of these animals to give you permission to go into the forest, sorry, but that's not how I roll, number one. And number two, you're going to get people killed telling them to go in unarmed, because then if you're attacked and you have no way to protect you, what's to stop you from being torn to shreds and literally eaten?
It's dangerous. It's very dangerous, and it's not logical. It's yes.
These animals don't like. One thing I learned in my encounters is these animals do not like gunfire. Now, I don't just mean when you hit them with it. They don't. You can see them when it's close to them and gunfire goes off. The way that they flinch, they don't like it.
Yeah.
So if for no other reason, to have a gun with you when you go into the forest, day, night, whenever, and even if it's a 22, at least if you can have, showed one of these creatures that you're armed, I think you're much more likely to be left alone than going in unarmed and just assuming that they know because they're all knowing, or, you've prayed to them or whatever. It's ridiculous to me. Right. But anyway, that was my first. I was in Southern California, and then my second one.
Well, first one, really quick, just so people know.
Sure.
That first Dogman that you saw, I believe the way I remember you telling me, it stood up. You had your firearm out, and you kind of did like a hand gesture, like, "Hey, let's just kind of." But it saw your gun. It kind of recognized what a gun was, and you both went your separate ways.
Well, he was standing. I heard growling to my right. I was on a trail, and I heard growling to my right, and I just assumed it was a coyote or something. Yeah. But when I got to a clearing and I could see into my right, off the trail into the little forest area, I could see about maybe 50 or 60 feet from me these yellow eyes looking at me, and they were over by a tree, right? And I was sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, man, that's a really large coyote, and I don't think there's wolves Southern California, even up in the hills, but it stood up then, right? And it was probably 7:10, if I had to guess, because later the next night I came back out there, and stood right where it had stood, because at 6'3", I wanted to see how much taller it was than me, right? And I would say it was about 7'10". And he, as he put one hand up on the tree, he was staring at me with his yellow eyes, right? And I was looking right at it, right? And at one point, he kind of dropped down on all fours like he was going to come towards me, right? And I had a 357. It was a 686 4-inch on my hip, and I had a little 38 special that I carried on my ankle. I never, even before Dogman, I never go into, because you could run across crackheads, drug addicts, bikers,
humans,
and if you're on, they're probably more dangerous than Dogman, because if you're out there alone, you're at their mercy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm never going to be at anybody's mercy. I'm sorry. That's one of the reasons why I love guns so much, is because of the great equalizer, right? I mean, You can be outnumbered, but if you know what you're doing with the gun, you can save your own life.
Exactly.
So anyway, when he dropped down on all fours, I pulled my 357 and I aimed it right at him, and I really felt that he was reading my mind, and I was saying, you might get here and you might attack me, but you're going to take 7 rounds before you do. And he stared at me for another second or two, and he kind of like, they say that he smiled. I don't think it was a smile, but it was more where he showed his teeth to me. And then he kind of stood back up again, and we had a moment where we were just looking at each other. And then he, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds, he was holding the tree. We were looking at each other, and then he dropped down on all fours. I'm just giving the cliff notes here. I'm not giving the whole story because we're on time budget. And then he dropped down, and he looked back at me once again as he turned around, and I looked at him, and then he did this jump. He took a few steps. He did this jump where it was like he looked like 30 foot almost. He jumped away from me and to the right, so I couldn't see him because he was behind trees, and he was gone.
Yeah. And
that was my first encounter. And then there was, I didn't have any nightmares, or, some of the people I've heard on other channels talk about, oh my God, I had nightmares. I mean, I already believed that these animals existed, but I never thought I would see one, especially in Southern California. But then when I went, again, I'm just going to give a brief story. Then I decided after I read the comments, I decided, because people say you can't kill these things. These animals are otherworldly. They go in and out of dimensions and all this other, they'll try to keep it G-rated, all this other stuff that was being said. They can cloak, some of these people said, and I was like, wow, okay, this animal looked like a pack animal to me, just a very large pack animal. And so I made a decision that I didn't read those comments, by the way, for several months. But when I did, it kind of struck me the wrong way. And like I told you, when somebody tells me I can't do anything, it puts a fire under my ass. And I say, well, if you guys say I can't do it, then I'm going to do it, right? And so some of the people who made the comments, now again, 20% of the people were like totally on my side, like, leave this guy alone. He's an adrenaline junkie. Yeah. But the other 80% were like, you can't kill these animals. They're supernatural. The idea of hunting one, because I had mentioned in the pre-interview that I wanted to go hunt one, that like I thought that was going to be like my last, as I'm in my early 50s now, I thought that was going to be like my last big adrenaline.
Yes. I don't speak for people, and I hate when I do it, when people do it. But I want to say this, and I said this to you. When you're an adrenaline junkie like yourself, in your 50s at the time, you're getting older. You've surfed, you've skydove, you're into firearms. A lot of people who are into firearms and are adrenaline junkies go on big game hunts. Okay? They go across the ocean in Africa, hunt lions, hunt hyenas, whatever, dangerous animals.
Yep.
You wanted to, I'm not speaking, once again, I don't like speaking for people, but you're not uber wealthy. You're not like Thurston Powell III. You're going to go and, put your elephant gun on your shoulder and, do this. But you were like, you can't kill these things. Okay, yeah, I've got firearms that can. I want to see if I can, because adrenaline junkies. And once again, adrenaline is a drug, so you were just like craving kind of that rush, that feeling.
Well, it was that coupled with the fact that people had said you can't do it. Right. And so I put together a team, a guy that had worked for me in the past, who was a long range. I actually won some tournaments, long range shooting tournaments, and then a Marine that I met in Oklahoma, where my mother lived at the time, and we now live in Arizona, but at the time we were she lived in Oklahoma, and I went out and I met this Marine who worked for my stepfather, who's now passed away. And I put together a little team, and we decided that we were going to go hunt one. And long the short of that is that we went out and we found a pack of Dogman exactly where Mark, the Marine that I was with, who had been wounded in Iraq, he had told me when I brought it up to him about the Dogman and my encounter, he had said that he had seen one and he knew where they were. And I said, well, do you think you could find it again? And he's like, yeah, I know exactly where it's at. And this is in southeast Oklahoma in the Ouachita Mountains. I think that's how you pronounce it. I got in trouble for that too, mispronouncing the name. I'm not Indian, so
I do too all the time when I mispronounce things
I got laid into because I mispronounced the name of the mountain range, but anyway, so we went hunting and we severely injured one and then wounded 3 other ones. Turned out we thought there was one that we were hunting, right, that we had saw up on a rock. John, the guy that was the marksman, actually it wasn't Mark, it was Mark who saw it originally, and then John and I came over and I looked through my binoculars and John was looking through his scope and found maybe 600 yards away that there was this was the biggest one I ever saw. It was probably 9 feet tall and 600 pounds. Right. Huge animal. And John put 2 4.16s in it. Now he didn't get it in the head, even though we thought we got it in the head and it was dead. And I was going over to do what I had planned to do, which was to cut the hands, because I knew these animals are too heavy to move, especially for 3 guys. I was going to cut the hands and the head off and put them in my backpack.
Proof.
So I could that they exist.
Proof.
I know it's kind of gruesome, but that's what I was going to do.
That's what everybody wants, right? Everybody wants proof that these exist.
Yes, and I was going to try it, and that was another thing. That was the whole point. I got accused of being this bloodthirsty guy that just wanted to kill something. I've never killed anything. I've never been a hunter. I've gone hunting a couple of times, but I never killed anything. And the only time I had a chance to kill a deer, I couldn't pull the trigger on it because I didn't want to hurt the deer. But these are not woodland creatures. These are not little furry animals that you can take jerky out into the woods and feed.
No.
These animals are apex predators that will kill you under the right opportunity. I'm not saying that they kill every time. There's lots of times they don't. But they are opportunists. They kill our livestock. They've killed people. They have terrorized people. So I don't feel bad that I wanted to prove that they exist, and I was told that there's no way, and I kind of believe now that the person who told me that there's no way you're going to prove that they exist because the government doesn't want us to know about them.
Right.
I believe that person was right about that they really don't want to let us know that these animals exist. But I don't think it's because the economy is going to collapse. I think it's because nobody would visit
national forests,
national parks, and number 2, nobody would visit national parks not well armed, and so they don't want, since our government is anti-gun, they don't want people running around with AR-15s and M1A 308s on their shoulder all the time and look like soldiers walking through the national park. But by all rights, these animals do exist, and that's exactly what we should look like, especially if you're going deep into the forest. I'm not saying you have to dress like that all the time, but if you're going to go deep into the forest and you're going to be away from a lot of people and you're on your own, you should be heavily armed.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
Absolutely.
So anyway, to make a long story short, we didn't kill any of these dogmen. We gave it a great shot. We wounded 4 of them. I personally wounded 1 with my handgun. I had a Glock 10 millimeter. I had other handguns with me, but I used a Glock 10 millimeter, and I hit one about 5 times, 6 times. And Mark wounded 1 with he had an AR-10. He wounded 1, and then John not only wounded the 1, he wounded a second one that was coming up behind me that I didn't see.
Yeah.
and I'm telling you that part of it because on the third encounter, and then we made it out of there, and you know, the commenters after that were, oh my God, this guy's trying to kill Dogman. These are creatures that should be left alone. They should not be hunted. You know, that, you know, these are spiritual animals. And look, I'm not saying that it's not possible that there's other types of dogmen that are more spiritual, I guess, you know, if you want to say that. But what I saw, my opinion is, and based on my encounter, these are just pack animals.
Right.
There's some sort of a hybrid pack animal. And in my opinion, they're the result of the fallen angels thousands of years ago taking and splicing men's DNA with wolf DNA, not ancient alien stuff. I'm talking about the fallen angels, literally, like the biblical story that, you know, because there's some parts of the ancient alien they have right, in my opinion. It's just that they don't call them angels. They say they're aliens. But right. I believe that they're angels, and they were doing, you know, they were trying to corrupt Yahweh's creation, and this is how they did it, by mixing all the DNA. And that's why we have pictures of these animals on the hieroglyphs. This is why we have stories of these in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Yes, Anubis, and this is why we have stories in the Middle Ages. I don't believe, and no offense to your listeners, but I don't believe in werewolves. I believe that all those sightings back in the Middle Ages were dogmen.
Yeah, like I don't think any of my subscribers believe they transform. That's 100%. You know,
that's a theoretical and biological impossibility.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you would destroy the flesh. There's no way that you could go back. If somebody did change like that, it would be one time, because there'd be no way that they could go back, because they would have torn the skin to shreds.
Yeah. We literally we're coming up on time. I want to make sure that you get your last part out.
Okay. So the last encounter was in August of 2021. I was leaving Oklahoma. My mom and I were moving. I take care of my mother, and we were moving back to Arizona, which is where she's lived, all of her property. And I went with a guy named Mike. I'm just giving you the short story here. I went with a guy named Mike. He's like a camper, outdoorsman, not really a hunter. He hunts occasionally, but he's more like
family.
Good friend of the family. He also worked as a handyman for my stepfather, and the 45 that he was carrying when this happened was a gift from my stepfather. Right. And he was carrying a 30-06 rifle. I went out there. We were not hunting a dogman when we went out there. I went out there because I wanted those wounded animals to know, because in the comments the people had said, oh, you left with your tail between your legs, you got ran out of there, they could have killed you, but they chose to let you live, you know, and there's no way you're ever going to go back there, you left with your tail between your legs, blah blah blah. And then I was just, you know, painting me out. Not only was I bloodthirsty, but I'm also
a coward. Yeah.
Now I'm a coward. And it's like, okay, well, how much of a coward was I, because I went out there in the first place, not once but twice.
Right.
And this time I went out lightly armed. And that's another thing. I was accused of being heavily armed. I was carrying 2 40 cal handguns and a 40 cal carbine. Not exactly what you would want to take if you're going to go hunting dogmen.
Absolutely not.
I did not go out there with the idea that I was going to hunt a dogman, but I did want them to see me.
Yeah.
I wanted to stand in front of them, or at a distance anyway, and let them smell, because they know your scent, supposedly. And I wanted them to know that I had the balls to show up again after what I had done, because we had inflicted a lot of damage on them.
Yeah.
And suffice to say, I saw one. The opportunity presented itself. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just giving you the short part here. It presented itself. I did not intend on killing one, but the opportunity, right, there's that word again, opportunity presented itself when I could see that it was by itself. He wasn't in a pack. And, you know, I tried to make contact with it, and I saw that it had a circular scar on its what would that be? Its right shoulder. And that's where John had hit it with a 416. This wasn't the one that took 2 416s. This is the one that John hit that was coming up behind me. He hit it in the shoulder. When you guys
were leaving.
Well, right before we were bailing out of there,
right.
When we realized that it was 5 of them and it was too many.
Yeah.
And we were bailing out of there, and he hit it so hard he knocked it, and it went behind a boulder or a tree, I guess, whatever it was, and we never saw that one again. I didn't think he killed it, and obviously he didn't. If that is the same one, I don't know that for sure. I don't know if it was the same one, but I think that it was, because it was in the exact area that we were in.
Right.
So I ended up killing one. I chased one down. I fired at it. At first I tried to communicate with it, not, in a big way, but I said, hey, it's me. And I knew when he looked into my eyes, I could see there was recognition. And I fired at it. Well, I tried not to fire at first. I just wanted to get up close to it. I wasn't pointing my gun at it, but he dropped and was about to come toward me. So I, let him have it. And I hit him 4 times, and then he started to run to my right back into the forest. I fired 4 times more at that point, but I only hit him twice in his back, and there was blood everywhere. I followed him into the forest, and at that point, some of the people making comments said, see, at that point, I could have let him go and not followed him. I defended myself, and I could have just left.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I could have, but at that point, I had committed.
Yeah.
I had committed. I said, you know what? I've already wounded him. I think I can kill this son of a bitch.
Also, really quick, too, for the people that, you've already wounded it. So by you hunting it down and killing it, you're also, for those people that, you're putting it out of its misery. For those people that,
that's how I saw it.
That's
how I saw it.
You started, you committed, let's finish the job.
Yeah, and I had a feeling that I could, and so I ran in after it, right? And I was, thinking about, should I put another magazine in? I didn't. I went with what I had. I had a 6-hour P226 is the gun that I used. I sent you a picture of it. Yep. With a 13-round magazine, and I had one in the pipe when I started, so I had 14 rounds. Later on, afterwards, when I ended up killing it, we counted the wounds because we pulled the body out to take pictures, and we counted 12 wounds. So I must have missed it 2 times because I didn't have any more bullets in my gun.
Right.
And then after I I wanted to say something that was like smart and funny, or smart ass to this creature, because I've been told that they can understand our speech or the way that our voice, the tones of our voice, what we're trying to say, right? So I looked at it, and I was trying to think of something really like
kind of witty,
deep and witty to say, and I couldn't. I could only think of those words from Samuel L. Jackson in Kong Skull Island when he's talking to King Kong, and he says, "Man is king." So I bent down my face only like 4 feet from its face, and I said it was still alive, and I said, "Man is king." And then I lifted up the gun and I put the last 2 rounds into its head and killed it.
Right.
And then my gun slid open and locked, and I put another round in. Well, right before that, though, Mike had come up right behind me, and I, being aware that these are pack animals, I swear to you, there was a fear there when I turned around that there was another one standing there, and I almost put a bullet in his head. And I remember telling him driving home how close he came to dying that day.
Right.
The adrenaline was so out of control, and I was shaking so much, I almost killed my friend.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
And then
really quick, we're almost on time, but I wanted to emphasize for you the redemption part, because I don't and you don't feel that you did anything wrong.
No, I don't feel I did anything wrong, other than I decided to take a risk that maybe I shouldn't have taken for my own safety.
Right.
But it's my life, and I enjoy pushing the limits.
Yes.
I've always enjoyed that, and that's why I did it. And like I said, I'm more scared of what happened after I killed that creature, having the pictures erased from my phone.
Yeah. You want to share that quick before we?
Well, somebody in the comments said that I had said that I was holding up my phone to see if it had service, and then as if like I needed to have service so my camera would work. But maybe I didn't say it when I was in that interview, but what I meant by that is that I realized when I saw that I had service that I could use my camera for my pictures. And maybe I wasn't elaborate when I described that, but that's what it was. I'm well aware that you don't need service to use your camera on your phone, right? I get it. I've had a phone since smartphone since 2011. I get it. But anyway, they had said that I was exaggerating, or, then I told the story about how the scariest part wasn't the Dogman. The scariest part is when we got in the trunk, when I escaped and we were driving away. Mike and I, the guy that I was with, were smiling at each other because we thought we had about 20 pictures of these animals. Yeah. So even though I didn't have a hand or a head, at least I had pictures with my foot in every picture to show scale, right? And when we got in the truck, the pictures were gone. All 20, not one remained.
And the key emphasis point on that is there was service, and the only way they would be able to access your phone is if you had service, and we're only talking about one entity that wants to keep these things a secret from us.
Right. We don't have to say what entity, but everybody who has half a brain should know there's only one group or organization that would have the ability. And people said, well, how did they know? And I believe, this is my opinion, that some of these animals are chipped. And when they die, they're alerted to it.
Right. Absolutely.
There's no other explanation, in my opinion, for it. But I just feel overall that the majority of the people, because I know we're running out of time, the majority of the people who heard these interviews made me out to be either one of two things: a bloodthirsty killer, or this guy that's just, I made up this entire story and that I did it just for, I guess, for attention. But I don't need that attention. If I really wanted attention, I would give my real name.
Right. You're not gaining anything out of any of these.
I'm not gaining anything out of this. No. There's no money involved. These are real stories that really happened. And as far as bloodthirsty goes, I'm saying here and now, I have never killed any animal other than a Dogman. Right. Hunting.
You couldn't even kill a deer. You couldn't kill a deer because you didn't want to hurt it.
A deer.
Right.
No, I didn't want to hurt it. But these animals are different.
Yeah, yeah. Before we end, I just want to I want to just say this, that you emphasize on opportunistic and things like that. Hyenas are opportunistic. It'd be no less than going in the desert or some part of Africa where a hyena is, and almost getting attacked by one of them. You would shoot it to protect yourself. Yes, you did go hunting one, but these things have killed multiple people. There's multiple accounts of these things killing people, terrorizing people. The
livestock.
One thing, livestock. The one thing that in Palmyra, Maine, a family was circled. The one thing that you did, and you just admitted to it, was you risked your own life. Everyone else that was with you was signed on to it and knew what they were getting into. You didn't risk their lives. They came as men of their own, but you risked your own life. That was the only stupid decision that was made that could be called stupid. Other than that, I've known you, like I said, for a brief amount of time, but we've talked for, the first night we talked 3-4 hours almost. It was a long time. And tonight we talked about this, we talked about other things, and I got a good feel from you. And I don't see you as a bloodthirsty, maniac. I don't see you as a coward. I feel like, you wanted to do something that most people want to do that won't do it, though.
Right. I'm just all I have different than other people. The only difference is I'm no better than anybody else. The only thing that sets me apart, like that Indian said, is that I'm reckless and I'm a risk taker.
Yeah.
That's it. And I did put other men at risk, but they knew going in. It wasn't like I lied to them. I told them exactly what we were doing, because there were some commenters that said, well, you put those other men at risk. But wait a minute. I told them what we were. It wasn't like I said, hey, we're going to hunt bunny rabbits. Right. I told them what we were doing, and they signed on to it. These are grown men, almost my age. They made their own decisions. So I just wanted to say in closing, I feel like I've gotten it off my chest. I wanted to say these things because I felt like the majority of the other audiences that listened to it, like I said, they either said I was bloodthirsty or I was being a bullshit artist, and neither is true. I'm just a normal guy that decided to take a risk, and I had the balls to go do it. That's how I view it, and I did it, and I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to go hunting for one again because I've done it now, and, people say these animals can't be killed. Well, if we're talking about this type of Dogman, Dogman, they can be killed. Is it possible there's another type that's somehow spiritual or invisible, or I haven't ever encountered them, so I can't speak to it, but in my opinion, these are pack animals. And if they can bleed, breed, shit, piss, and eat like we do, then that means they can be killed.
Yeah. Brad, it was awesome having you on. I'm glad that we were able to do this show. I'm glad that you reached out to me. And, in closing, thank you very much. I don't feel like you did anything wrong. And, I hope that you and I can talk for a while, for a long time now, because I feel like you're a friend now. So thank you for coming on, my friend.
You're welcome. And I really want to say in closing that people, Jeff's a good guy. He's an honest guy. He gives you a fair shake. He doesn't direct you or tell you what to say, and he lets you just tell the story. So, and he's a good guy. So to any of you listeners, you're listening to a good person, and I won't be doing any more Dogman stories. I've had my fill, hopefully, right? But I just wanted to get this out because I'm never planning on doing any more shows or talking about this again, but I just wanted to speak my piece, and Jeff gave me the venue to do that. So thanks. I appreciate it, buddy.
No worries. Thank you. Don't hang up, because I want to talk to you a little bit after.
Okay.
All right. So with that being said in the intro, a little bit of explanation, I guess. I never really thought when I had my experience that there was any kind of godliness or demonicness related to Dogman. I always kind of thought that hounds of hell and dogmen and these creatures were kind of all separate. But as I've grown through the years and become more open-minded to certain theories and ideas and beliefs, I have grown to appreciate and accept certain views. Never would I, years ago, even entertain the idea of a angelic creature or being, whatever, going against a dogman. And I say angelic creature because they're not human. They're angels. If an angel falls from heaven and drops to the ground, it's a fallen angel. It's then, to me, a creature. But I think it's truly amazing that this experience happened. Brad got to experience it. I someday hope that, yes, I've seen a dogman, many of them, 6 at least, that were in the woods that day in 1994. But someday I hope that I have that opportunity to see some sort of angelic being, just to even see with my own eyes, maybe not even to have a few brief words pass between us. But so anyway, guys, thank you for all your support. I really appreciate everything. And this channel means the world to me. And, my dad actually watches every video I put out. So anyway, guys, have a great day, and God bless you all.